My fantasy goes like this. M calls James Bond. James, we're in crisis. We're facing life-threatening climate change. It has to be stopped, James, and we're relying on you. And then, as in every Bond film, James goes off to get the gadgets that will help save the day. Past the shiny cars and the fancy weapons, he looks on as Q reaches into a bag and hands him a pair of Tango shoes. Read almost any article on our current leadership challenge and they frame a consistent problem. Our context is one of uncertainty and complexity, of rapid change and infinite variables, and we can no longer ignore our interdependencies. And the issues we're facing are huge, not just about our business needs, but about our society and our shared planet. How do we respond to this? What kind of leadership do we need? In more than 20 years working in learning and development, I've come across an awful lot of leadership theory and practice. But my most powerful and illuminating insights came from a really unexpected quarter. Things started to make sense as I deepened my practice of Argentine tango, hence the dress. So I set up Ballroom to Boardroom to take those insights into organisations and also work with education. I'm an associate lecturer with the Institute for Leadership and Sustainability. But let's start a little bit further back in my story. I'd been dancing tango for about 8 years when I decided I was going to go to Buenos Aires. I really thought I was a good dancer, and if I could spend a few weeks in this tango capital of the world, then, do you know, that would be all I needed to polish the edges and become brilliant, right? Yeah, you're laughing and you're smiling, you're right, it didn't quite go to plan. Buenos Aires was a really different world, so far from my little town, and what I'd learned, all my fancy steps, they just hadn't equipped me for it. I didn't need to polish the edges. I needed a radical overhaul. That, if you like, was a personal Control-Alt-Delete moment, and what it felt like was an ego-puncturing, frequently demoralizing, and really tough process of unlearning and starting again. But what I learned didn't just change the shape of my dance, it spilled over the edges into my life and my work. When you think of tango, what is it that you imagine? Strictly? Anybody? Yeah? Maybe something a little bit like this? Well, this is tango, but it's the show dance, choreographed version. When I talk about tango, I mean something more like this. Great, that's me in my radical overhaul days, dancing quite badly, but you can see there that it's really different. In this version of tango, our steps aren't planned. We don't know what music is coming up next. Our partner doesn't always do what we expect. We have no control of who else is on the floor or what they do. And out of all of that, two people, probably strangers, co-create, moment by moment, the most intricate and expressive social dance that we know. How do they do that? And what can we learn from it? Because they do it in a way that is respectful to every other couple on the floor. Today I'm going to share with you just 3 of the insights that we can take from the ballroom to the boardroom. The power of the follower, the power of connection, and the power of collaboration. So my first big revelation in Buenos Aires was that there is nothing passive about following. And I realized that essentially that's what I'd been doing. Don't get me wrong, I was so keen to dance and so eager, I wanted to dance. But I realized I hadn't really been offering anything into the dance. Essentially, I'd just been waiting for my leader to tango me around the floor. Let me make that a little bit more visible to you, and I want to introduce and welcome Gina, who's agreed to help me with some demonstrations today. Thank you. So we're going to get into a practice embrace. And it's not that we're practicing to embrace, it's an open hold or embrace that we use sometimes for teaching in Tango, and it's great because it helps you see what's going on as well. So here we are. We're ready to dance, yeah? Well, no. Let me tell you what dancing with that feels like. It would feel like trying to drag a sack of potatoes around the floor. So we're going to try it again and do it a little bit differently. Okay. Feel different?
Definitely.
Okay. Would you be willing to say a few words to the audience about how different that feels?
Sure. I feel much more of your energy and much more engaged.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you heard that at the back because she's not mic'd. So she said she felt much more of my energy and much more engaged. So we're not even moving yet, but my partner can already feel the difference in my energy and presence. And what I learned was that I needed to bring to the dance the same kind of level of that energy and commitment as I expected from my leader. What happens when I don't dance powerfully is that all the responsibility, all the burden for creating that dance is dumped on the leader. And on top of that, because I'm not really generating my own momentum, what happens is I can often end up hanging on for balance and support as well. And that's really hard work for any leader, and it massively restricts the dance. So yeah, I needed to show up in the same way that they did, no different. If you studied at London Business School, I bet you spent a fair chunk of time looking at leadership. I wonder how much time you spent looking at followership. Do you know any organization that has a followership pipeline? No, of course you don't. We underestimate and neglect the role and the power of the follower all the time. It's the biggest thing I see when I teach Tango. Followers don't expect to take an active equal role. And most leaders don't expect or give them space to either. But what happens when we elevate followership, is two things. It liberates leadership, and it also opens up possibilities in the whole of the dance, which we'll look at a little bit later. So yeah, I changed the way I thought about the follower role. And when I started to be more present, then I began to see a paradox. In order to dance really well, I needed to stop thinking about dancing really well. And I needed to start thinking about connection. That's what's at the heart of Tango. That's what my presence enables. And it's the second insight that I want to share with you, if I could have Gina back on stage. So, the power of connection. We're in our lovely embrace, and we're ready to dance properly now, yes? And we're going to go that way, so go. Okay, not so great. You didn't know what foot I was going to start on. I told you we were going to go that way, and then we went, yeah? Let's try it again. This time, we're going to do it a bit differently. So, where are you? Let me find where you are. Okay, now I've got you. Now we're moving together. Now I can give you some intention, and we go. And I won't walk you off the stage. So it's different. I want to layer something else on that. What I'm going to ask you to do is lead me that way. So you're going to be walking forwards, leading me backwards. We're going to do this a couple of times, and it'll be interesting to see if you notice a difference. You're certainly going to feel a difference, but I just want you to do it exactly the same. Okay? So. Thank you. We'll reset, Control-Alt-Delete. Here we go, back again. Okay. Okay, brilliant, thank you. Fantastic. So, did you see anything different? Maybe, maybe not. Let me explain what was happening. In the first one, Gina's there. I really receive her intention, and I respond. And she comes. And I respond, and she comes. In the second one, I receive Gina's intention, and I respond. But I'm staying here. My energy, my presence up here, and my heart is really working to stay in the connection. So when we move together. We dance by staying connected. What you see really clearly in tango is that this concept of leading and following only makes sense absolutely in relationship. Let me put it another way. Either they coexist or neither of them do. And that sounds really self-evident, but what I see when I go into organizations is that we don't talk about it that way. We talk about them in isolation. We focus on one half of an equation, usually leadership, and then we wonder why it doesn't add up. When you or your partner or your friends date somebody, it's really normal to ask, hey, how's your relationship? And it's such an interesting question because we recognize in that the relationship somehow has its own existence. What we lose sight about when we talk about just leadership is that we're talking about a relationship here. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 equals you, me, and this relational dynamic between us. And that's where our dance is. It's even there in the language of tango, in that you've heard me use the word embrace already and not hold. Well, in the Spanish, we don't use the words lead and follow. They just don't exist in the dance. Instead, the word is marcar. And any Spanish speakers amongst you, you'll know that that literally translates as mark. But in the dance, what it means is indicate, open, invite. It's so interesting what happens when you shift to a more power-neutral language. Suddenly it's not about what I do to you. Did I engage you? Did I empower you? Instead, it becomes about the quality of our connection, the clarity of our intention, and what we create together in this relational space of the dance. So what we have now are two people who are, yes, they have different roles, they have different ways of moving in the dance, but they're fully sharing responsibility for co-creating it. And that can feel like quite a paradigm shift. And it certainly did for me. But what it helps us with is my final principle that I want to explore. And Gina, if I could have you back on stage. What I want to explore is the power of collaboration. So what thank you, we'll start slightly offside because the way we're going to move, you'll see it better. So I've asked Gina to just open up a space for me. Brilliant. So here's my space. I've got my invitation, right? I can respond, and I can do this quite simply. And we're back together. You stay there. I'm going to reset. We could do this, or I could respond much more creatively. Let's see. I could do something a little bit more fancy. Or, from this position, what I could do is something else completely. And I could do this. Stay there, don't do it yet. Brilliant. So, a couple of things before she makes that move. First of all, just want you to notice how hard I'm working to stay connected here. My feet have gone that way, but I haven't done this because I wouldn't be in the embrace or in the connection anymore. So I'm actually really working to stay here and stay connected and present. And yeah, I've given her a different suggestion. I see your move, I raise you this. So, what are you going to do now? Ha-ha. Okay. So where do I go here? I don't know. Let's try something like that. Thank you. That's lovely. So what that enables it, we've just created something beautiful and expressive that neither of us could have led individually. And it's emerged because we kept connected, because we really sought and trusted the best intention in the dance. And that makes a space for creative collaboration. And that's so exciting, because that's full of infinite possibility. That's the power of collaboration. The dance is now a constant dialogue of invitation and response, where who exercises what we think of as leadership is fluid and shifting. When we dance this way, we're not managing the unexpected or controlling it. Instead, we're deliberately making space for it. In fact, we're actively going looking for it, and we're building the dance out of it. That's the power of collaboration. So when I started dancing, I really did think it was all about lots of fancy steps. What I learned is that the fancy steps are just the expression of the dance. But the heart of it is in the connection. It's in actually the relationship. So when I take to the floor, I've got no idea what's going to happen, not even in the next step. But I do know that if I'm fully present, if I really connect with my partner and trust the intention, and then we embrace what emerges, that's when our most exciting and powerful dance happens. When I started this talk, I gave you a fairly outlandish question, very thinly disguised as a James Bond fantasy, which is, can tango really offer anything into the big and knotty problems of our time? Well, let me rephrase the question. Do we need to be able to operate confidently with what is emergent and unknown? Do we need to be able to harness our collective creativity? And do we need to stop waiting for our leaders to open up the way for us and get in there and start creating it with them? What I experience in tango is an approach that enables all of this. Where both leader and follower are dancing really powerfully. And yes, it does mean letting go of some old paradigms in our language today to reset, to Control-Alt-Delete. And I should warn you that not everybody dances tango this way. If you go out there and you try and dance, you'll find some people who do and some people who don't. But when you do, the dance is so much more alive and so much more full of possibility. So I offer the insights to you with a lot of hope and with a little bit of provocation. Are you ready and willing to reset? Dance powerfully, connect deeply, and really embrace what emerges. I'd love to know what happens. And if I should see any of you pulling any practice moves during lunch, I'd be really, really pleased. Thank you very much.